Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Hey everybody, I guess I can't say ho 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 now. It's Happy New Year. Hopefully everybody's got the holidays out of your system now. I know me personally, I've gained quite a few pounds eating cookies. So I'm sure the rest of you, have probably added a few pounds to your waist as well, as it happens every holiday season, right? So I guess that means moving forward, we have some work to do to get rid of those extra pounds that we put on. I know I do. Anyway, I personally am looking forward to a new year, considering that COVID has been such a pain in our asses for the past couple of years. It's starting to get really, really old. And now, of course, the Omicron virus or the variety is now on its upsurge. Our daughter, Diane's daughter, is in the medical industry, so we hear quite a bit of the sad news of people dying from it and the upticks in hospitalizations and all that. So it's never fun to hear that. So hopefully everybody's safe. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Learn Photography with Duck. And so let's get to it. One thing I want to point out, last month I started with the photo challenges, to see how it would go. We only had one person participate. So hopefully this time around, you guys, now that you understand how it kind of works, maybe we'll get you involved as well. So the one that I got going for the January right here is about portraiture. All right. I want you to create a portrait with some kind of moody lighting. All right. Now, obviously, it's going to be very open to interpretation. What you consider to be mood lighting is entirely up to you. But generally, you got to understand that mood lighting tends to be something that is a little bit more drastic than the conventional lighting. A lot of people think, mood lighting, very dark, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, okay? Because you can have very bright, high-key lighting that also creates a mood. It just happens to be a very bright, uplifting mood, all right? So the term mood doesn't necessarily have to be, dark and brooding and all the images of like Rembrandt lighting and all that. It doesn't necessarily have to fit into that little niche. Okay, it could be anything that exudes some kind of mood, some kind of emotion. But what I want you to do is I want you to play with light. Now, what you use to generate the light, it's entirely up to your comfort level. If you're comfortable with flash, go ahead and use flash. If you are better off with continuous lighting, go ahead and use that. If lighting scares you and you just want to stay, within your comfort zone, then experiment with natural light. All right. I expand on last month's photo challenge where, you explore the different types of light throughout the day. Explore the kind of light that comes in through a window or under a tree or, through a doorway. Okay. It's all about getting you to look at light in a different way with a photographer's eye. Okay. What I don't want to see is last minute captures. Please take your time with these. All right. I'm including myself in that because, I set myself up for failure last week by getting too involved with other things and not paying attention to the challenge and doing it last minute. Okay, so you can use anything for your subject. You can use your friends or family, or your significant other, or, if all else fails, throw yourself in front of the camera. It's a little bit harder because, you're playing the role of subject and photographer, and now you really can't see what you're doing as you're setting everything up until after you've placed yourself and taken the picture. So make it easy on yourself. See if you can wrangle somebody. Okay. One suggestion I can make on that aspect is maybe get some kind of a stand-in, right? I have my little mannequin that I picked up for like $20 off Amazon. All right, you don't need to get anything like that. You can use anything as a stand-in. A stuffed animal is sufficient. Okay, a basketball. Put it on some kind of something to hold it in place. Okay, use that to kind of get to play with the light and get it the way you want it, and then insert a live person. That way they're not complaining that you're taking too long. You're not self-conscious about, oh man, I'm unsure of myself and I got somebody in front of the camera just, eyeballing me and probably wondering what the hell I'm doing. All right. So take that pressure off. You put something inanimate in there. And then when you're ready to take the picture, substitute it with a live person. Okay. So the same rules apply. When you are done, go ahead and put it into a nice large format JPEG. Email it to me, and we will look through it on the last session of the month, which will be our Q&A session. Okay? If possible, try to get your portrait done before next week. All right. And the reason I'm saying is because next week in the Photoshop class, what I want to go over is kind of my workflow for editing portraits. It's a little bit involved, but for those of you who, do people photography, you can take some of these lessons and incorporate it. It doesn't necessarily have to be for portraits. It could be for any time you take a photo of a person and you want to make them look a little bit better than just a snapshot. Okay? Everybody has seen a snapshot of themselves. And unfortunately, they tend to be really, really bad. All right? And that is kind of what leads to people saying, oh, don't take a picture of me. I never look good in pictures. Is because they are reacting to not necessarily bad photography, just, unedited images. It just maybe puts them in the wrong light, in the wrong situation, and just highlighting a lot of the flaws. Part of what we do with photography when we take pictures of people, we try to make them look their very best. Okay? And even with minimal amount of editing, you can get them looking to their very best. So if you can get a portrait done before the next class, then you'll have something to work on as I explain my workflow. Okay, and it's going to cover all kinds of things, including some really neat what I call check layers that can help you, fix the flaws. All right. So that's for next week in the Photoshop class. Okay. All right. This week, let me go. Oops. Where are we? Get the title here. This week, what I want to do is, hold on 1 second. My phone's blowing up here, and I don't know why. All right. This week, because we're in the new year, what I want you to do is, holy cow. Hold on 1 second. I think somebody's having a hard time getting in, maybe. Give me 1 second. Let me see if this is somebody trying to get in. Oh, yep. Anybody know Gaston Gray? Anybody know Gaston Gray?
Not personally, but he's been with us before.
Gaston. All right. Can I ask somebody to do me a favor and see if you can send them the link to the chat?
Okay, he just messaged me.
Awesome.
I don't use messaging that often. Let me send it to him.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bill. Otherwise, I only got 2 hands here. Okay, so So because it is the new year, what I want you guys to do is just take a quick little inventory of your system. Make sure that your camera is updated properly. All right. Most of the time, most cameras, the time and the date and all that, that's all taken care of. All right. You don't have to worry about that. But if you have entered any kind of, copyright information, you might want to make sure that it's updated, especially if you used a year, like copyright 2021. You want to make sure that you update that now to 2022. Okay. Me personally, like I've said many times before, I'm a little lazy when it comes to certain things. So those types of things I don't want to worry about. So I never put a date on my copyright. I just say, this image copyright and then my name. Okay. The date, in my opinion, the date's already attached to the file. I don't need to put it in my copyright. It's all right there. That being said, what I want to do is go over how to change it if you need to change it, or if you've never realized that you can add this kind of information. Well, here's where we can do it. Okay. So let me switch over to is everybody okay just enlarging your screen, or do you want me to share my desktop? Enlarge it? Okay, one for enlarge. Anybody for sharing? We're good? Okay. If at any point, you can't see what I'm doing, then go ahead and let me know. Okay. All right. So the copyright information, typically you can have that added in with your camera, right? And it's added in through your camera menu. You just look in the back and go to depending on whether you have Nikon or Olympus or Canon or Sony or whatever. Look for something in the menu that says copyright information. Okay. And then you can enter your copyright information right into the camera itself. Okay. And that's going to keep it with your EXIF information. Right. But what I do, there he is. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, good.
It's Brian or Brian? Yeah. Okay. So, what was I going to say? So the camera will have that information, but what I find is that my information may change depending on who or where I'm sending my image. Okay. For example, if I'm sending an image to a client, I may have slightly different and or more information embedded into those files than I would to something that's going out to Facebook. Because I know that Facebook is pretty much going to strip a lot of that information out anyway. but it's, you know, for commercial photography, it's important to have certain information that will help protect your files, your content, okay, your intellectual content, all right? So the nice thing about Lightroom is that you can create different metadata profiles depending on your needs, all right? So me personally, like I said, I tend to be, you know, a little bit Spartan with some of the things that I do, simply because I don't want to have too many things for me to track and worry about. Okay, so in order to create, so what I've done is I just created one profile and I call it my copyright profile. Okay, and this has to do with just your metadata. All right, modifying the metadata to your image files as they are imported. All right, so what is metadata? Metadata is any information, data, all right, usually some kind of text that gets embedded into your image file, into your raw file, right, or your JPEG file, depending on what you're shooting. Okay, it is not visible when you open up and view your image. It's not like, you know, there's anything printed on the face of the image. You actually need software to be able to read this metadata, right? And most viewers that open up JPEGs and open up RAW files, you can look at this metadata, okay? And me personally, I really encourage you to make sure that you at least, at the very bare minimum, have your name embedded into your images. Okay. Now, we understand that the way the copyright law is written is as soon as you create an image, you are the copyright owner. Okay. But of course, if your name's not attached to that file, who's to say who the owner is? So that's why I encourage you to at least have your name. Okay. If you are a working photographer, I also encourage you to have some way of somebody getting a hold of you, finding out who, not only who you are, but how they can reach you. Because once it's out there, you don't know who's going to be looking at these images. Okay? And anybody who is in the professional capacity of working with images knows how to get that data out of the images. They just open it up. If they like the image, they say, oh, let me find out who took this photo. The first place they're going to go is that metadata information. Okay? And if you at least have your name, that's great. But if you have a common name that, you know, like Peter Smith, good luck to you. That's why you need to include some way of contacting you. Okay? Now, obviously, how much information you embed into these images is dependent on your comfort. Okay? Me, I'm very comfortable putting my business email on there, my business website on there. Okay? I don't put my phone number, not because I'm afraid of people getting a hold of it, because it's my business phone number. But, you know, I've had several business phone numbers. Okay? But my website's been the same. So keep that kind of in mind. All right. So let's create a copyright information profile for your images in Lightroom. Okay? And it's actually very, very easy. Okay? In the library module, actually it doesn't matter where you are, but typically in the library module, you're going to go to the top menu where it says metadata. You're going to click on that. And about halfway down, you're going to see when it says edit metadata preset. Oh, and of course, I'm hiding it. let me turn that off. Okay. Metadata, edit metadata presets. Okay, and you click on that, it's going to bring up a dialog box. Okay, fairly simple. Okay, and at the very top, by default, it'll say custom. Okay, but you'll see that I have one already created that says copyright. Okay, and of course, my philosophy is that when you name anything, you want to name it in a way that very quickly lets you know exactly what that is, what it is that, that preset does. Okay. In this case, it says copyright. There's no question about what that does. It's my copyright information. Okay. So feel free to use that as well. Okay. If you don't have anything, don't worry about it. We're going to give it a name at the end. Okay. Now, it's going to look a little confusing because there is a lot of information here that can be modified. All right. The majority of this you don't need to worry about, because the majority of this is filled in by the individual image. Okay, so you're going to see a lot of blank fields here, all right, that just you don't need to worry about. We're just going to ignore, simply because they're going to be eventually populated by whatever information comes off the camera, okay, like the copy name. The copy name by default is going to be your file name. If you change it somewhere else to a different name, all right, that becomes the copy name. That will auto fill in on its own. Okay. Same thing as ratings, labels, things like that. You don't want to put anything here, because what's going to happen is anything you put into this preset is, whenever you activate this preset, it's going to send that information to the file. All right. And because this is in a preset that oftentimes does not get changed on a regular basis, you're going to need to be, yeah.
Yeah, for copy name, that's if you want to change the name of the file to a different name?
Typically, yes. Yes. All right, so what happens is the original name that came off the camera, that's the one that gets displayed when you look at it. When you change it, it becomes the copy name, but the system still retains what you originally called it, or what the original file name was. Okay?
But you would do that for each picture?
Well, no.
Okay.
No. It's typically done on a per picture basis somewhere else in the system. What I'm saying is, don't do it here.
Okay,
all right?
Thank you.
Because if you put something here, it's going to take whatever you put in this field, it's going to apply to every single image that uses this preset. Okay?
Thank you. That's what I don't want.
Right, right. That's what we definitely don't want. Okay? In my opinion, some of these should not be here in this dialog for exactly that reason. But because this dialog box is also used in another part of Lightroom, they just kind of repurpose the form. Okay, so I want to warn you about that right now, because it can be a little confusing. Okay, like for example, the next one down is the camera info. All right, user comments, GPS information. All right, that's taken from the image when you change it somewhere else in Lightroom. Why it's here, it shouldn't be, but it is. All right. That's why I want to strongly warn you that some of these fields you don't want to touch now. Okay. All right. What we do want to concern ourselves is the copyright information, and you see that it's the fourth one down. Okay, fourth one down, and it says IPTC information, and the IPTC information is something that it's fairly recent. All right, a lot of the first few digital cameras, all they had was EXIF information. EXIF stands for exchangeable image file format. Exchangeable image file format. Okay, and a lot of that information comes directly off the camera. You know, what lens you use, what aperture, what shutter speed, did you use a flash, right? What kind of camera, what kind of lens, all that. And that information, because it comes off the camera, you really can't edit. It's not editable, right? But that information that you put into the camera, such as your copyright notice in camera, that gets carried over. Okay? All right. And by default, if you don't have this information, the system will use whatever came off the camera as the default. All right. But me personally, I want to make sure that, you know, when I am working on an image in Lightroom, my information gets embedded on the output. Right? I don't want to second guess if that EXIF information is correct or even there. Okay, so IPTC stands for International Press Telecommunications Council, and this is the council that kind of oversees press photographers, media photographers, trying to create a uniform system of communicating information between agencies, specifically when it comes to newsworthy images. They want to make sure that they're tagged properly in order for those images to be culled out to the different systems. All right, so proper tagging in the news industry is very critical, and they have a very standardized format. We don't need to worry about that as, you know, amateur photographers, all right? But because this information is available, we can utilize some of these fields, okay? All right, so for yours is probably going to be blank, all right? Your copyright information is the copyright, who's the copyright owner, okay? So you're going to put your name there, okay? Your legal name, not nicknames, but your legal name, okay? The next one down is a little drop down, okay? Just said copyrighted, okay? If you provide images for Creative Commons, okay, you can go ahead and create a separate preset for that. And there is actually a place here where they can say, okay, you know what? This particular image, I don't care about it. I'm just going to put it into the public domain. Let whoever wants it can use it. All right. So you have that option here. Okay. When you fill something out, make sure that the checkbox next to it gets checked. By default, as you start entering data into these fields that are blank, you'll see that check automatically populate itself. All right. So just make sure that that check mark is there, okay? Rights usage term, all right? The standard one is all rights are reserved to you, meaning you are the sole owner and proprietor of that copyright, okay? So all copyrights are reserved to you. Okay, that's the default, right? And this is what should be on your cameras as well. right? When you go to your camera and you put in your copyright information, you should have all rights reserved, okay? Some people will put, you know, the little copyright symbol, 2022, all rights reserved, all right? Me, I don't even bother with the date, because like I said, the date's somewhere else embedded into the file anyway, okay? And then the next one down is your copyright info URL, okay? I don't have a copyright specific URL on my website. As I think about it, I probably should, but I don't, okay? But if you know, conveying your copyright is important to you, and you want to know, you want to give people information about, you know, what is acceptable and not acceptable to do with your work, you might want to consider putting a page specifically for copyright information on your website, and then you can put that URL there. But since I don't have one, I just at least use this as a way for somebody to find me on the internet. I put my website on there. Okay? It may not lead to my copyright info, but it does lead them to my website. Okay? And from there, they can find who I am, how to reach me, my email, my phone number, the whole 9 yards. Okay? All right, the next one down is your creator information. Okay? Creator information. For the most part, it's not necessary, you know, but I fill it in anyway. Okay? Again, what level of comfort you have with your personal information is entirely up to you, but you don't have to fill all of these fields in, all right? For example, the creator address, I don't have my address on there, all right? My business address is not my studio address. My business address actually is my home address. I don't want my home address out and flying around the internet willy-nilly, so I'm going to protect it, right? And I could put my studio address, but you know what? That address has changed at least once since I've started my business. You know, if it changes again, I don't want to worry about, you know, having old, outdated information on there. Okay, they can find my address just by going to the website. Okay, but I will put at least the city and state. Some people will just put the state. Okay. And then a zip code if you want, country of origin, or creator country, I should say. My phone number, again, I don't put that on there. They can find that on my website. Okay. But I do have my email. Okay. So if they need to contact me for any reason about that image, or hopefully hire me for, you know, something similar, they have my email right there. And then my website, okay? And then you can put your creator job title. I'm going to update this. I'm going to put owner, okay? All right, and if you notice, as soon as I started typing, that little check mark automatically populated itself, okay? All right, the next one down, we're not going to worry about. All right, because this is information that you can fill in on a per image basis. Most people won't. Okay. Same thing as IPTC status. Okay. And pretty much the rest of this is leave it blank. Okay. There's a section for video. All right. There's a section for keywords. All right. All right. Here's a perfect example. Where do you put in keywords? There's a whole facility right in Lightroom for putting in keywords. You don't need to worry about that here. Okay? That's going to be added in elsewhere. Okay? So leave it blank. Okay. Now, at this point, hopefully you are creating it. Okay. Further down the road, if you say, I need to edit this information, keep one thing in mind. If you say, well, you know what, I have my city here. Maybe I don't want this city. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Okay. Just because you deleted it here does not mean it's going to get deleted. Elsewhere. All right. I want you to kind of follow this. This gets confusing. Okay. If you delete it here, okay, if you make any changes and you delete something, make sure you leave that check mark checked. Okay. Even though there's nothing there anymore, leave it checked, because this is going to tell the system that, hey, this field has been updated. It's been updated with a blank, but it's been updated. If you delete this and then uncheck it, it's not going to make any changes to that field. Okay? And that information is going to stay. Hopefully that follows. Any questions on that? Hopefully you followed, right? Okay. All right. So just make sure that. All right. So basically, the IPTC copyright and IPTC creator is the only two sections you need to worry about here. Okay? All right. For those of you who joined in while I was starting this, I'm not sharing my screen, but if you want to see it, just expand my screen to fill yours, so you can see the detail. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? I'm filling this out. It's pretty straightforward. It's a form. You guys know how to fill it out.
I did one thing in the top field. I put the tag as red, so that it'll show up red on my input and say I haven't done anything with it. Is that wrong thing to do? I label it as a red.
Label?
So if I enter, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I changed it after I worked on it, and I dump it in, say, dump it in on some 2 or 3 times, I dump things in and haven't got time to edit it. I use that. I don't want to try it now.
Personally, I would not do that here. Okay. Because when you apply this preset on import, which is usually when it's done,
yeah,
it's going to mark every single image you import as red.
Oh, okay.
All right. You don't want to do it here. All right. This is for ratings, labels, things like copy name, caption. Those are temporary labels, temporary statuses. Okay. This is for something that's going to be permanent. Okay. Yeah. So, that's why I said leave everything blank except for the copyright and the creator information. Okay. Everything else should be blank. Okay.
If you have multiple profiles, how do you assign them to your pictures?
What do you mean by multiple profiles? Like
Okay,
one for work?
I'm sorry, I meant to say multiple presets. Let's say you have multiple presets. You have a copyright one. Let's say you have multiple clients. For some strange reason, you need 2 different presets for a different client. How do you assign them to a picture?
Okay. So this right here is there's 2 ways of doing this. Okay. One is kind of like the lazy way. You create one copyright notice that kind of covers everything you do. Okay. And then on export, you assign your specific copyright notice.
Okay.
Or because oftentimes maybe you have a steady client and you're doing like work for hire. All right. There's a perfect example of where the copyright would change. Okay. Work for hire. Okay. You're not going to mark those images that you did for hire with your information. You're going to mark it with their information. Okay. So you will use a preset with all their information, and just make sure that when you ingest those images, you have the correct copyright notice selected, right? And then you make sure that you're only batch processing just those images for that client.
When you mean ingested, do you mean export?
No, ingest is taking in, importing into your catalog.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's where I got confused because for ingesting, I've never seen where I assign copyright.
Okay. Remind me. I'll show you where it is.
Okay, because I know about export.
Yeah.
Because I do things for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That are different than what I do for me, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
And I noticed
and to be honest, it makes better sense to do it when you're importing the images than when you're exporting them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I notice on export, you have a choice of either assigning everything to it or just copyright information.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I need to know the ingest.
Okay. All right. So.
Oh, and also, I need to delete the preset you don't want to use.
I'll show you in a second. Okay. So now, if we look up at the very top, all right, that little drop down is all your presets. Okay. If you notice mine that says copyright, right after it, it has appended the edited in parentheses for it, because I've made a change to the information in this preset. Okay. So I'm going to drop down that. All right. And it's going to say, and I'm going to put update preset copyright. All right. Because I only have one. Update preset copyright. I click on that and I am done. Okay. If this is your first time creating a preset, all right, you're going to go to the top and you're going to save current settings as new preset. And when you do that, a new dialog box is going to pop up. You give it a name, all right? In my case, like I said, keep it simple, stupid. I use copyright, okay? Because when I see that, or you can say, what kind copyright is kind of vague. Let me put my copyright. Okay, my copyright. That way, when you look at it, all right, it's not just some random word that says copyright. When it says my copyright, you know exactly what it is. Okay. For you, Bill, when you create the new one, you will put the association's name, Acme's copyright, okay, or Joe Blow's copyright, or whatever it is, right? If you're a second shooter, okay, most oftentimes as a second shooter, you're just going to hand over the card. But if you are also responsible for doing any of the editing for a second shooter, okay, whoever hired you as a second shooter, create a profile for them, put their name, Pete's Wedding Service copyright. Okay. That way, when you bring those images in, you click on the correct copyright notice and then everything gets done automatically for you right on the ingest. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say cancel because I already have my copyright notice. Okay. And then when you are all set, you just click done and you now have a preset for your copyright information. All right. if anything changes in your business, all right, or you personally, all right, let's say you move out of state and you say, oh, you know what? I don't want it to say Connecticut anymore. I need it to say, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, wherever you move to. You just come back, metadata, edit metadata presets, go to where you want to change. Okay. All right. My copyright. All right. Connecticut, put in the new one. Make sure you leave that checked. Okay. And then come up to the top. And, well, I didn't make any changes, but it'll say update copyright preset. Okay. Any questions on that step? Okay. So now, where do we find this? When we hit the import button, we get our import dialog box. Okay. We pick our, what's our source? How are we doing, adding it to our catalog? And then on the right-hand side, we have all of our tabs here. And the one we want is apply during import. Okay. And you're going to see three little boxes. The first one is your develop settings. And I highly encourage you to create, if you haven't yet, create an editing preset that applies your basic edits on ingest. It just makes things a little bit easier. Okay. I think I've covered that in the past. All right. But the next one down, you're going to see metadata. All right. And if you look at mine only has one because I've only created one preset, and that is my copyright preset. Okay. Copyright. Okay. And this is where you would select which preset you want to apply to the images that you are ingesting at that given time. All right. The thing is, you have to be aware that the images you're bringing in, everything that is selected is going to get that preset. So make sure that you only select images for that particular client or that particular job. Okay. If like for example, a second shooter. Okay. Don't mix your stuff in with them because it just makes a big mess. Do it in batches if you need to. Okay. All right. If you forget how to do this, all right, and it says, oh, I can't remember what Doug said about creating one. Well, guess what? Here is the option for you to create a new preset or edit an existing preset. Okay. And it's going to open up the exact same dialog box. Okay. All right. So you can do it from here as well. This obviously it's a little bit more awkward. All right. This is only if you forget. Okay. Because most of the time you're going to be from the main window in Lightroom anyways. All right. So hopefully that answered your question, Bill. Okay. And then of course you would add your global keywords before doing your import. Right.
And how would you delete the preset?
Oh, yeah, good question.
Maybe that's not mentioned.
Copyright, right here, delete preset copyright.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for doing this because I sort of ignored it because it looked sort of complicated and like you said, there are things I just don't want to do with this. So I've let it go in the past.
Right, right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about Lightroom is the ability to do a lot of this housekeeping stuff before I even get to the images, you know? And yeah, for the majority of us, whatever comes off the camera, that's what we're going to use. That doesn't matter, all right? But where it really shines is people like you who work for news systems, people like me who have, who work for clients, right? And our information needs to change according to where that image is going, right? And the reason I say do it on ingest rather than when you export is because once the images are in, your focus now shifts. It goes to organization, now into edit mode, okay? I want to edit my images, all right? I'm not going to be worrying about all that metadata stuff, okay? Except maybe, keywords, okay? And maybe renaming a file or two. But other than that, I hardly ever think about my copyright notice when I'm editing my images. I'm not saying to myself, oh, this image I got to change. This image I got to change, all right? And where it becomes a hassle is you got 100 images. Now all of a sudden you have 100 images that you have to make sure you change the copyright notice, okay? So I'd rather not put that kind of stress on me mentally. I'd rather take care of it on ingest. That way it's done, out of sight, out of mind. I only have to remember it once, and it applies it to everything. Not having to remember it 100 times every time I export an image. Okay, make sense? All right. Okay. All right. That's pretty much it for that lesson. The other one I mentioned, of course, is a preset, a develop preset. Okay, here's another one where, there's oftentimes certain things that you don't want to be thinking about every single time you open an image, right? And this is nothing new. I've said it before. There are certain things that I do to each and every image that I edit, because I edit to what looks good to me, right? And I've mentioned the fact that I'm color deficient, right? In the red and green spectrum, I have a hard time with the very, very light, kind of like pastel greens and pastel reds, okay? I have a hard time discerning those. And what I found is that I have a natural tendency to really like boosted saturation and a boosted contrast to my images, because to my eyes, they look better, okay? So I edit to what appeals to me, okay? Not necessarily what appeals to anybody else. Usually I'm making images for myself, okay? So because there are certain things that I do on every single image, what I've done is I've bundled that up into a preset, and I have it done for me right off the bat, and it does it to every image that comes in, okay? And piggybacking on that, part of the workflow that I tell people when you're working on images is the first step that you do to your image before you go into your creative edits is you want to normalize your images, okay? And what do I mean by normalize? Okay. We've all been out on a shoot where things kind of go fast. We're aiming our camera in one direction. We look over our shoulder. we spot something that we like and go, oh, click, 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 and then we turn back, okay, to what we were initially concentrating on, okay? And because some of this happens very quickly, we don't really take the time to fine-tune the exposure. Sometimes our horizon may be a little bit off, okay, because we did something very quick, okay? If you shoot sports, right, the last thing you're really worried about is, keeping that, horizon level, okay, because you're just trying to get the action. You say, oh, I'll take care of it later, okay? So part of normalizing is correcting any minor flaws in exposure, okay? And these are, I call them flaws, but they're misfires, basically. We didn't have the luxury of time to make the proper exposure. We know that we can do it in post, right? And it's usually a third of a stop, 2/3 of a stop, maybe a full stop, okay? But usually something very minor, okay? The other thing kind of ties into me being the lazy photographer is that I set my camera to a default white balance and a default picture style in camera that never changes. Never. I don't touch those. I don't want to be bothered. Okay? Because I know those are temporary changes that I can modify, when I go to Lightroom. Okay? So those things need to be changed, right? And obviously they're going to change according to whatever it is I'm shooting. If I'm outdoors, I know my white balance is going to be changed to reflect that outdoor shot. If I'm indoors in fluorescent light, I'm going to be changing that. Okay, so I don't need to worry about that on the onset. Okay, but things like adding that little bit of contrast, opening up my shadows just a little bit, dropping my highlights down just a bit, I find that I do this every single time to every single image, okay? And it's not a fault of the gear, really. It's just the way, the camera captures the scene. Digital photography tends to capture highlights a little bit brighter than shadows, okay? And because of that, the shadows tend to be a little bit darker, right? So there's a little bit of imbalance in that exposure. We have a very linear exposure when we take it off the camera, but the proper exposure tends to have a bit of a curve to it, all right? It's called that contrast curve, where we drop the highlights, raise the shadows just a little bit. If you've ever done any kind of editing, you've probably heard that term, contrast curve, okay? And that's all it's doing is it's introducing a little bit of more contrast to your images, all right? So I created a preset for that. The other thing that I want in my preset is whatever lens, I want you to autocorrect for that particular lens, all right? I want you to apply the manufacturer's correction for that lens that the camera manufacturer has given to Lightroom to embed into their system, okay? And if you go to, let me go to the develop module. Down here, lens correction, okay? There's a whole section right here. Lens, okay? Remove chromatic aberration is one of them. Enable profile corrections, all right? This information you don't have. This information comes from, in my case, comes from Canon. If you use a Sigma lens, it comes from Sigma. If you have a Nikon lens, it comes from Nikon, all right? So those two, it automatically populates and applies the corrections automatically. Okay? Very, very rarely do I find that I don't want these changes made. Okay? Oftentimes, for me personally, it's when I'm using my really extreme fisheye. All right. Me personally, I love that extreme fisheye look. I don't want that correction applied to it. But because it's such a rare instance that I use that lens, that I will make the change away from the auto change, auto adjustment for that particular lens. I'll deselect it. I'll take the enable profile corrections. I'll uncheck it for those lenses. Okay. But on a whole, overall, because I have so many different lenses, I want Lightroom to do this for me automatically. Okay. So that is part of my preset. Okay. So actually, let's see, where is there it is. Import, pop, and squat. Right there. That's my preset. All right. Unfortunately, there's no way of showing you what the insides of the preset are. That's a little bit complex. I'm not going to get into that right now. But the way you can make a preset is fairly simple. Okay. What you want to do is start off with a very generic image that is fairly kind of typically exposed. Let me see. Here we go. I'll pick this one. All right. Go ahead and reset this. Oh, okay, good. Nothing's on here. Okay. All right. So I have an image straight out of the camera. This is what it looks like. Okay. And I know that every single time I want to do a few things, okay? So I'm going to start at the top, okay? My white balance will always change according to the image. So I'm going to leave that alone, okay? I'm not going to do anything with that. Oops. All right. My exposure also will change according to the image. I'm not going to bother, all right? Same as contrast, okay? But my highlights, I tend to bring those down just a touch, okay? And my shadows open up just a touch, okay? And my preset is just to 10 points, okay? Again, you're trying to find the median that applies to all your images, okay? So I add a little bit of contrast right there, okay? Just in the, just in the highlights and my shadows, okay? My whites and blacks, okay? If I want to, yeah, you know, you can maybe do, you know, drop the highlights, drop the whites, open up your blacks a little bit, all right? But those I tend to do elsewhere. I tend to do that from the histogram, okay? And that's called setting your black point. I tend to do that with the histogram. So I'm not going to bother messing with those on my preset, okay? The other thing that I definitely do is I add a lot of texture, okay? And I also up my clarity, right? I like that crispiness that these two sliders add to my images, okay? The only time that I use kind of like a negative texture or negative clarity is when I'm doing portraits. Okay. But again, I'm building this preset to work nicely with a broad set of images. So I'm going to keep that in mind and keep that in place. Okay. And I also add a little bit of vibrance. Okay. And not much, usually about 20 points. Okay. And I don't touch my saturation because I find when I switch my camera profile, it's going to add saturation for me. So I don't want to be adding saturation on top of saturation. Right? Make sense? All right. So I usually keep that untouched. Okay. Come down.
20. Did you add 20 for texture and 10 for clearance?
Yes. Yeah. All right. Now, again, this is what I've done. Doesn't necessarily mean this is what you need to follow. All right. You're going to follow your instinct, what looks good to your eye. Okay. All right. But let me put a little caveat here. All right. Even though what I'm showing you here is how to build your ingest preset to kind of like normalize your images, right? The same process can be used for creating any developed preset. Okay? All right. Now, what I want you to do when you create a preset, right, is keep in mind what it is that you have changed, right? Because this plays into creating a useful preset, right? Now, what I mean by that is the way Lightroom uses presets is that whatever values you enter into this section, right? That's the value that's going to be given to every other subsequent image. Okay. So now, stepping away from my import preset, if you create a preset for, let's say you want a preset that warms, adds warmth to your image, okay? If you adjust your highlights and shadows for that initial image that you're building the preset off of, and you save that, every time you use that preset, it's going to apply those values, regardless of what values are already being used, right? So you have to be careful with presets because they can override something that you've done in your edits earlier. All right, so be aware of that. So if there's something specific that you want your preset to do, just make sure that you're not touching any of the other sliders. Okay? So let's say, for example, let me go to image. Okay? Let's say I want to make this a little warmer. I say, okay, here's my I added warmth by using the temperature slider. Okay, maybe my tint slider. Okay, and notice how I have exposure, highlights, all these other edits have been done. Okay, if I save all of this along with that white balance, it's going to upset any image that I make adjustments to, right? That's why it's important to understand what it is specifically that you want that preset to do, all right? In this case, I only want it to affect the white balance. So when I make that preset, I want to make sure that I am only saving the white balance information and nothing else. Okay? That's why it's important as you're building this, keep either a mental note or just write it down, what it is you're changing. Okay? White balance, exposure, contrast, shadows, whites, whatever it is. Whatever is going to be applied for that preset, write it down so that way you know it gets exported in your when you create preset. Placing everything else at its default. Okay. All right, so that's it for my basic. I don't do anything in the tone curve, but if you want to add something like contrast curve, you put the highlights down, you bring the shadows up, right? You can do that. Okay. All right. Hue saturation, I don't do anything here. I'll the same way with color grading, all right? Because working on color tones and color grading, that is a creative decision. That gets done later, after I've normalized my image. Okay. Detail, all right. The default sharpening gets applied. Okay. So I'm not going to worry about that. Lens correction. I definitely want lens correction. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that the chromatic aberrations is checked. My enable color profile corrections is checked. All right. And actually, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if the resolution's good enough through Zoom, but see if you can notice the shift when I uncheck it. Check. Right? Especially if you look like up into the corners. Okay. If you look into, wrong one. If you look into like the corner, you'll see how the lens correction gets applied. That's without it. That's with it. Okay.
Now, quick question.
Yeah.
If you have that checked off, enable profile corrections, but it's a different lens, does it automatically use the correct lens correction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can do default or you can do auto. Okay. I just basically keep it. You keep auto. You'll cover yourself there, right? But Lightroom reads that EXIF information, and it's going to populate this from the EXIF field. All right.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to make sure that it
yeah.
wasn't going to apply like my 70 to 200 lens if it was
right.
50 millimeter.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
My experience with that, I believe I have it on auto, but in most cases, it knows my lens. Like
Yes.
It knows my, except for two lenses. I have an older 40 to 80.
Yeah.
It doesn't recognize I have to put the camera to the Canon, and my camera doesn't recognize that I have to put the camera, and in both cases, it fixes it.
Yeah. There are a few exceptions to the rule. All right. The database for camera profiles is pretty extensive, but not complete. Okay. So you'll get that with older lenses. You'll get that with. You'll also get it with any lens that is not part of the system that you're shooting with. So, for example, if you have, I'll use Canon as an example. If you have an FD lens and you use like a Metabones adapter on an FS system, which is the current EOS system, it's not going to recognize it. Okay? So, yes, there are exceptions. Also, new lenses that are just entering the market, before it gets updated, it may not recognize it. All right? So just be aware of that. But that's something that can be changed on a per image basis. So, again, we're building something that is going to kind of be applied to the majority of our images. Okay. All right. Lens correction, transform. All of these are done on a per image basis. Effects, which is your vignetting and your grain, that's on a per image basis, as well as calibration. All right. Although I tend to pump my blues saturation a little bit, so you can, if you want, create a preset with that already included, because there's rare occasions where the blue shift doesn't work in my favor. I can always reduce it down. Okay. All right. Once you've made your changes, notice that I've done nothing with cropping. All right. I've done nothing with my camera profile. Okay. And I've done nothing with the treatment. Okay. I'm going to keep it to whatever the default is. And the default is color off your color camera. Okay. I now have kind of like this generic ingest setting. All right. So for the next one is you're going to go down to the left-hand side to where you have your presets. All right. Open up your presets panel, and you're going to see the little plus symbol right on that tab. Okay. And you're going to click on the plus, and you're going to say create preset. Create preset. Okay. And it comes up with a the dialog box. All right. Now here, pro tip, the first thing I do every time this preset window pops up, I go down to the bottom, right, where it says check none, and I click on that. And that is going to remove any checks off of these checkboxes, right? I want to make sure that I start off with a blank canvas here, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and give it a unate. So let's call it my import preset. Okay, import preset, right? And the next one down is the group. You can put it into whatever group. The user presets is the default, but if you have any folders, you can put them into any of those folders. I'm just going to keep it. I'll keep it in my user preset. Okay. Now, if you want to cheat, okay, okay, and deal with whatever Lightroom hands you, go ahead and hit the auto settings and create your preset just with that one. Okay? You can do it, right? I find that actually, since Adobe has introduced Adobe Sensei, which is their artificial intelligence, their ability to auto-correct an image has really, really gotten good, right? Back in Lightroom 3 and 4, I would never consider using the Autobahn because sometimes it did some really crazy adjustments, okay? And you'll find that in extreme contrasts, the auto setting doesn't quite know what to do with your image, okay? So, or if you are purposely shifting your exposure to either overexpose or underexpose on purpose, the auto setting tends to kind of disregard that. So just be aware of that, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to just apply the changes that we want. All right. So we're just going to go down each list. All right. And in the basic, I'm not going to click on the white balance because the white balance is going to be changed later, as well as exposure and my contrast. However, I made changes to my highlights, so I'm going to put a check there. And I made changes to my shadows, so I'm going to make a check there. Same as my texture and clarity and vibrance. All right. Because these are the things that I identified that I do on all my images. All right. Sometimes a little bit more. Well, oftentimes a little bit more. Very seldom a little less. But keep in mind, this is a preset that gets you close to the results that you want, and then you can modify it from there. Okay. My tone curve, all right, if you applied that contrast curve, go ahead and click on your tone curve. If you do any changes to your hue saturation and luminance, all right, color grading, again, color grading is something that is done on a per image creative basis. I'm not going to select it. Same thing as my sharpening, my noise reduction, and my color noise reduction. All right, lens correction. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just check where it says lens correction. It's got to auto fill in the other four. So it's going to remove chromatic aberrations. It's going to enable that camera profile. It's going to apply any distortion changes, which I didn't have selected, and vignetting. All right. This is not post crop vignetting. This is the it's taking the profile from the lens, and if the lens has a natural vignette, usually like telephoto lenses may have a little bit of vignetting in the corners. Some wide-angle lenses have a heavy vignetting in the corners. This will compensate for it according to the manufacturing standards. All right, so you might want to have that checked in. Okay, my transforms, that's done on a per image basis, the same as my post-crop vignette and grain. And then I made a change in my calibration, so I'm going to make sure I check that. Okay. Once you have that, all these checked, you're going to go ahead and click on the Create button, and you will now have a preset. So now if I go to my user presets, there it is, my import preset. Right here. Import preset. Okay?
How did you get at that screen with those stuff?
Okay, so once you have all of your settings set, all right, you're going to go to the left-hand side where it says presets here, right? Yes. Right next to it, there's a little plus arrow, all right? You're just going to hit the plus arrow and say create preset. Create preset.
Thank you.
Okay? And then you go through the process, make all your checks, click on the create button, and then you will have your new preset right there. Okay? So let me go ahead and reset this image back to the default. Okay, reset. And now if I click on that, you're going to notice that all my settings have changed, all on the click of a button. Okay? So now we have a preset that we can use wherever we want. But what we want to do is we want to apply it when we bring our images in. All right? So one way to do it is from the library. Oops. Let me get out of there. The library module, we go import, apply during import, right here on the right hand side, we see where it says develop settings. Okay. We go to our user presets. There's the new one, import preset. Click on that and it puts it in. Okay. That's one way of doing it. All right. But what I want to do is as soon as I make it, I want to make sure that I apply it. So if we go to that preset and we click on it, right click on it, all right, the second one down says apply on import. Go ahead and click on that, and you're going to notice that it has a little plus symbol right next to it, little plus symbol, okay? That plus symbol lets you know that it's being applied on import, okay? And now you don't have to worry about it. We go to our import dialog box, and right there it is, import preset, already populated. Okay? Any questions on any of that? I know that was quite a bit to cover. No questions? Either I'm a good teacher or all right. Thumbs up from Alan.
I get it. And again, I've been avoiding import. Yeah, what you talked tonight. I've been avoiding it.
Yeah.
It's beyond me, and it's like read the manual. Sometimes I don't.
All right. Well.
So what I do is, when I bring my pictures in, I go over to develop, and certain things that I want to do, like up the clarity or the lens correction, and up the vibrance. I've been up in the saturation too, and then I will choose a picture and control for all, and then I'll do auto save.
Okay. And you find that you do that repetitively over and over and over?
No, I do that only once.
No, to every image.
To every image. So what I
Yeah.
do is I do it to one, and then I do control.
Yeah.
For all, and then on the right hand side on the bottom it says auto sync.
Yep.
And I sync them all that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there, done that. And then I discovered my import preset. Yeah. So
I'll try that next.
Yeah. So hopefully this now demystifies a little bit, and hopefully it also showcases the power just within that import dialog box of what can be done to your images. If you are a YouTube viewer of people that teach Lightroom, you might find some people that kind of argue against some of what I just showed, simply because they say, well, what's happening is when you are applying a preset to all your images, okay, what happens is now every single image now has something done to it. And then if you look down on the film strip, let me go back and expand, see how much I can expand this. Okay. Down in the corner, it applies a little symbol. All right. You notice that every single one, it's kind of like that contrast symbol where it's half black, half white with a little plus minus symbol. Okay. You'll notice that it's on every single image. All right. And their philosophy is they use that little icon as a way of tracking if they've made any edits to the image. So their philosophy is, I don't want anything done to the images. Just bring them in. I'm going to pick and choose which ones I'm going to edit and which ones I'm not. Right? And then as I am editing, I can look down on that little symbol and say, oh yeah, I've already edited that image, and then move on. Okay? I don't really buy that because, for one, I tend to edit multiple images at a time, and I tend to edit in stages. Okay, when I'm doing a batch of images, okay, again, I'm trying to minimize my time in editing. So if I have 100 images that I got to go through for an event, I'm going to go through in batches, and I'm going to batch process, batch edit my images. So when I am in this view here, in the library view, with the thumbnails, I can look and spot, well, this one is a little bit underexposed, and this one's overexposed. Okay, so this one's underexposed, I'll select that. This one's underexposed, I'll select that. Okay, and I'll just hit my control, all right, and I'll go control, all right, and pick out multiple, and then on the right hand side, I can adjust my exposure from here in batches. Okay. All right. Actually, let me see if I can find a better example, because a little here we go. 2021. Let's find okay. These have already been edited, so let's go to my seconds. Okay, so I can look through and I can say, okay, all right, so this one here is a little bright. This one's here a little bright. This one here is a little bright. Okay. This one here is a little bright, little bright, little bright. Okay, let's bring my exposure down. Okay, good. Now, oops. Now I can see, now they're starting all to look, all right, this one, the highlight's a little bit bright. So let's bring the highlights down. All right, so I can do a lot of my basic normalization here. Okay.
Doug, can I ask a question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're doing the wedding. The church has one set of lighting. Outdoors has another.
Yep.
Reception hall may have two separate kind of lighting depending where you are in the reception hall.
Yep.
Does it make sense to take your batches of pictures and put the church in one batch, reception hall A in one, and then do different presets for church, reception A hall, A, B, outdoors, and so on?
If it makes sense to you, then yes.
Okay.
If it doesn't, then no. But the way I look at it, like for example, here's a good one. This was a ribbon cutting at a law firm. Okay. Their law firm was up on the second floor, but they had the reception in the lobby because of COVID, right? So a lot of the action spilled outdoors into the courtyard, right? So people went in, grabbed the food, they were able to go out onto the courtyard, eat and mingle, without being on top of each other, right? Although if you look at some of the images, they were on top of each other anyway. Okay? But this is, for me, this is all one event. Whether some of it occurred indoors, some of it occurred outdoors, and some of the images were taken upstairs. They were all part of the same event. So I don't distinguish it by location in this case. However, for wedding photography, all right, that's a slightly different story. Okay, I will separate it pre-ceremony. Okay, and some people will say, all right, this is, pre-ceremony groom, pre-ceremony bride. All right, and then they have another folder of images just for the ceremony. Okay, and whether you're taking photos indoors, outdoors, around a building, people walking in, people walking out, doesn't matter. If it's all part of that block that we think of as being the ceremony, they go into that folder. Okay. Then I'll have a block of images just for the formals, the formal images. Okay. Because usually the formals are the ones that are going to take the most amount of time and care for editing. And then I'll have a folder for the reception. All right. And again, that doesn't matter if they're standing indoors, outdoors, at the buffet table, out by the pool, wherever. All right. It's all part of this reception. They get clumped all together. Okay. So in that situation, it makes sense to have some kind of logical organization, just so you don't have 1,000,001 images on top of each other. Okay. And then for each one of those individual folders, once I've made my selections, at that point I'm going to create a subfolder, and that subfolder, whatever I don't want to use for my edits, goes down into the subfolder. Those are my seconds. Okay, so that in each parent folder is only the group of images that I'm going to dedicate my time and effort to editing. All right, and at that point I will edit in batches. I'll edit all the groom photos. I will then edit all the bride photos. I'll take my time doing the ceremony photos. Really take my time with the formals, and then very, very quickly go through my reception photos. Okay. Once
breakdown would be to use multiple cameras.
See, me personally, I don't care what camera took the photo. All right.
My lenses on an A7R4 and an A9 are going to be they have a different capture than just by a different lens.
Yep.
So if you categorize all my A9 pictures, and it's just a separation actually with my workflow anyway.
Okay. All right.
I was just ideas that were thrown into the conversation.
No, that actually, you know what? See, this is why I love this forum. All right. I don't have that issue. So that issue's never cropped up into my workflow. But definitely, thanks for bringing that up, because it does create that concern. All right. But
a lot of the time we're using heavy shooters nowadays.
Yep.
The shooter again, as long as you have the equipment, doesn't have to have what studio itself is shooting. So I mean, there's starting to shooting the world making the entity process a little bit more complicated. You want a consistent input, consistent presentation.
Right. Well, so in this case, you have to understand your equipment and what it's doing to your images. If you find that a certain system, if you use multiple systems and one system is not looking like the other, okay, you're going to weigh it to what you favor. All right. So let's say you favor the way Nikon images look. So now you say, okay, everything that's coming off this Olympus doesn't quite match. So you need to do a little bit of study and say, okay, what do I do to make those Olympus images look like my Nikon images? Okay. And then you make a separate preset for that. But that's still done on ingest. Because again, what you're trying to do is you want to keep it so that when you are actually in the editing workflow, you want to be as effective and as efficient at that time. So anything that you can do to make your time easier, do it automatically on ingest. So in your situation, yeah, definitely make 2 presets, one for the Nikon, one for the Olympus. That way, when the images are now in your system, they all look fairly close to each other. And at that time, the only thing you need to do is do your creative edits, right? Make your life easier, okay? But as far as segregating Nikon into one folder and Olympus into the other folder, I wouldn't suggest that, because there's no way of visually comparing the two without doing a lot of back and forth to make sure that the 2 images are looking the same. If they're all pasteurized in the same folder, you can very easily see, all right, this one, and this one needs to be warmed up so they match everything else. Okay? But hopefully, if you build a proper preset, when they do come into your system, those Olympus images will now match closer to your Nikon, making your job a little easier. Right? But that's just my thought on that. Okay? Does that kind of touch on what you said, Alan?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just bringing that up as part of the discussion.
Oh yeah. No, that's perfect. That's again, like you said, nothing. I never really considered that, but you're right. Right. See, my thought is, I don't care what took the image. I just want to make sure that the output is consistent. And I want to make sure that my workflow creates that consistent output. Right? So if you find that that on the import there's some kind of discrepancy, analyze it, correct it, all right, and put it into some kind of automation that, facilitates the process for you, all right? So now, once you have all your images edited, in all these different folders, the nice thing about Lightroom is that you can take it that step further, and you'll now create a, here, let me go here. You're now going to create a collection, right? Oops. I hate the way they make these so close to each other. Okay. Let me close this up. You're going to make a collection, all right? And you're going to give the collection the name according to the bridal party, all right? And this is where you can build your final gallery, or the final album that you're going to deliver to the bride and groom and their parents and relatives and all that, okay? Because now you can pull resources from across multiple folders and put them into one location. Make sense? All right? So this is where, you utilize a different aspect of Lightroom to continue your workflow. Good? Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, cool. That was good questions. All right. Did I confuse anybody in that one? I know we got deep into some stuff, but hopefully that helped. All right. Do I have to hand out aspirins from the brain pain?
No, because unlike some of the lessons, I tried to do some of these things. Some of the other things that you've shown, I just never did before. And
Right.
it was totally foreign, where this was, okay, I tried it again, all right, I'll figure it out. I'm not going right, I need it now, whatever. But it makes more sense to me now. When you showed that first screen regarding the profile,
The preset?
the preset profile, the preset for the metadata, it's like, I used to look at it and go, what do I want to do here?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
it's
No,
like,
like I said, it can be very confusing. Yes.
it's like, oh, that's all you have to do? I mean, you don't need to fill in everything. It's like,
Right. Yeah. Cool. Cool. So now everybody should be building their own copyright preset, and
one thing
hopefully,
I have to remember what to do is I have to remember whether I'm working on my stuff or for the nonprofit.
yeah. But you know that as part of your workflow.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
know, because your workflow for a client, even though there's a lot of similarities, there's also a lot of differences.
There are a
You
significant
know,
amount of it.
yeah. Where the images are coming from are different. Where the images are going to be exported to are different. Okay. Even the way you process your images may be a little bit different.
Yes.
So your mindset is already going to be in that particular workflow. All right. So if you're doing work for your nonprofit, that nonprofit's already in your head. All right. So when you go to ingest, because your head's already there, he says, "Oh, I am in the import dialog. I am importing the nonprofit images." Okay. Oh, make sure my nonprofit copyright notice is up there. Okay. That now becomes part of that new workflow. Okay. And the one thing I find about workflows, and I think I've touched on this in the past, is a lot of people who are just starting out really don't understand or know the steps, so they have a hard time understanding what their workflow is. But that's never going to change. Your workflow is always going to be modified. It's always going to morph and meld and bend according to what it is that you're doing. As you learn, new things are going to be brought in. Hopefully, some bad habits are going to be tossed out. And your workflow just kind of just grows with you. So, hopefully, I've added a few tricks to your workflow now.
In my case, also, this person, this nonprofit, he gives me his disk, he gives me his hard drive, and I process it for him because he doesn't know anything about post processing. So
Yeah.
Of course I have to make sure it's his name and not my name.
Right. Yeah, that's important. Okay. Any other questions about anything that we discussed?
My feedback this evening is this was a really good topic and it was well presented. For me personally, I need to get started and I'll probably do things rather simply, like the calibration example, at least get the concept understood, implemented, and then, as you said, keep growing and adding to it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One question that crossed my mind is that we see advertisements all the time for preset collections.
Yep.
And how you educated me this evening is really what they are is effective work tools to reduce repetitive tasks.
Yes.
Somebody actually look at acquiring, however you want to describe it, a preset collection? What would really value in that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Okay. Let me switch over. All right. Oh, before I answer that question, I just want to touch on something you said just a little earlier. All right. The preset that I used as an example today didn't come to me right away. All right. This is something that I identified in myself after having been working with Lightroom for a number of years. You know, I putzed around just like everybody else, trying to figure my way out through this rather complex program and stumbling along. It wasn't until I saw somebody else explain it to me that that little click in my head went, and I go, oh, damn. You mean all these things that I've been doing over and over and over, I can have Lightroom do it for me? And then I had to, once that clicked, then I had to slow myself down and try to identify what specifically was it that I did to every image. It's not like I inherently knew. I had to consciously think about my editing process, because at the beginning I was just pushing sliders left and right, trying to figure out what everything does. It wasn't until I kind of sort of understood what the sliders did that I identified, oh, I'm always adding this, I'm always subtracting this. All right. And I said, okay, let me make a good preset. Right. And that's where I identified that median, that in between all the different types of images that I take. Right. Once I identified that, that's when I built my ingest preset. Right. And let me tell you, I don't go anywhere without it. That's my go-to preset. All right. So yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Doug. I'll wait till you finish this question on the buying presets.
Yeah. So Lightroom comes with a ton of presets. Okay. Now, if you notice, when I open up my preset tab, you're not going to see a lot. Okay. Everything here, all right, user preset, that's standard. That comes with Lightroom. You cannot rename it. You cannot delete it. It's there. It's permanent. Okay. These are all my presets. All right. And I kind of use my user preset as my temporary folder and as my kind of like my, I don't know where to put this, I'm just going to dump it here folder. All right. So, like for example, this one here that keeps flashing up. Oh, if you haven't noticed by now, if you hover over the title, it's going to give you an indication of what the preset does. Okay. That Insta Mask, I created for a lesson way back when, and I never removed it. All right. So if you ever want to delete something, just right click and click on delete. It'll ask you if you really want to make sure you delete it, and I said okay. But if you notice here, I have two presets: my presence pop, okay, and my lens correction auto. All right. So going back to my early history, when I figured out, oh, presets can automate stuff for me, these were the first two that I really put attention to building. All right. So that now every time the images came in and I had an image that I wanted to edit, I went and clicked on those two right away. But guess what? That was still a step that I could have removed. And it took me a couple of months to figure that out. Right? I said, I'm not repeating 100 steps as I was previously. I'm now repeating these 2 steps over and over and over again. What the hell? All right. So what I ended up doing is I took the settings for my Presence Pop, and I took the settings for my Lens Correction Auto, and I combined it into a single one, and I called it Import Pop Swap. All right. And again, the name should mean something to you. For me, import, what's it for? It's for when I import my images. Pop, it adds that little contrast pop and that color pop and that clarity pop, okay? That edits for my eyes. And then the last one, and squat. What's a squatter? Somebody that just sits there. So that one just kind of, it does what it needs to do, and it just sits there waiting for it to do it, okay? And that's what I used as my go-to preset, okay? The reason I have the other 2 is sometimes I will reset my entire image, all right? And I may want to apply just one or the other and not necessarily both. So I maintained that option in my preset, okay? But because and I'm going to get to answer your question in a second, Alan. Because I made these presets, I understand what's in them, what they do, and when I need to use them, which are critical for using presets. Okay? My cinematic grunge. I know exactly what it does, and I know exactly when I want to use it. Okay? And I know, because I built it, I know where I can come in and make whatever changes needs to according to my subject. Okay? All right. Now, Lightroom comes with a bunch of presets. All right. And the only one that you're seeing here is this one that says Creative. And the only reason it's there is because I was playing with it earlier. All right. You're not seeing any of the other. All right. But if we go to where the little plus symbol is that you clicked on earlier, it's going to bring up this dialog box. And the last one here is Manage Presets. Manage Presets. And if you click on it, it's going to bring up this kind of like rather lack of information dialog box. All right. And all it does is it allows you to check or uncheck all of these presets that come with Lightroom. Or actually, let me refine that. Any preset that is loaded into Lightroom, you can check it and uncheck. Okay? But the folders, not the presets themselves, the folders. Right? So I've hidden all of these from view because I don't know what these presets do. I didn't build them. I would have to spend so much time looking through these. All right. And all right, let me just, I checked off a bunch. Okay, here we go. Portraits. Let's go grain, sharpening, vignette. Let's click all those. Why not? All right. And I'm going to hit save. Okay. Now look at my preset folder or tab rather. Okay. Let me close this up a little bit. That's a lot. Okay. Here's one folder called Portraits. Okay. Portraits PD01 yellow. Does that tell you what it does? What's the only clue? Oh, I must do something with yellow. All right, well, first of all, let me change my folder here. Let's go to my classroom folder. All right. Let me pick this, go back to my develop. All right, yellow. Okay. If I hover over, oh, it just adds a lot of yellow. This one probably adds ooh, that looks terrible. Who would want to add orange to a portrait? Okay, or red, right? Maybe if you're getting creative, who knows, all right? But now there's nothing here that tells me what this preset does, and there's nothing that I can click on that tells me what it does. I would have to, let me make a copy, virtual copy. All right, I'm going to select my virtual copy. I'm going to reset it straight out of camera. Okay. I would have to click on this. I would then have to go down the line of all these panels. Here's my basic panel. Well, it opened up the blacks a little bit. It reduced the texture a little bit. Okay. I think it probably did something to the color temperature. I'm not sure. All right. Let me go to the tone curves. Oh, it did something here. Don't know what. All right. Oh, yeah, it added something to my luminance. Didn't do anything to my red. Didn't do anything to my green. See how I have to go in and kind of dissect this? Oh, it added red and removed orange in the saturation. All right, did it do anything? Oh, it added a little bit of red luminance. Did it do anything to my hue? Oh, yeah, it reduced. How time consuming. And there are hundreds of presets, right? And if I go through all of these, you think I'm going to remember all of this? No way in hell. All right. Fortunately, we can hover and see kind of sort of what it does. All right. But now I have to take my time and hover over all of these all the time. Okay. And say, okay, well, no, that looks terrible. That looks terrible. Oh, this is, all right. That's not too bad. The PD02 yellow. PD02 yellow. Okay. So now, hopefully now you can understand a little bit of the cons of having pre-made presets. All right. Because you did not make it. You don't know what it's for. You don't know what's in it. And you don't know when to use it. All right. It's only through heavy experimentation that you get to find that out. All right. And what I would suggest is, all right, yeah, I'm sounding a little negative about pre-made presets. Okay.
A little.
All right. Call me out on it. Yes. All right. However, there are pros to it. Okay. And the pro is that after a while, you do get to, identify what works. Okay. And you get to see, okay, oh, wow, this is a way of, this one here, this is a way of editing. This is a way of editing I never thought about doing. Right. It's a little heavy-handed. Maybe I'll back off on this, back off on that. All right. But I'm kind of liking the look of this. Okay. So once you find a preset that appeals to you, all right, and you say, okay, how can I use this? All right. Well, first, you'll want to identify what doesn't work for you and maybe correct it. Okay? And then at that point, either copy it or just rename it to something that makes better sense to you. Okay? High contrast, high saturation makes better sense than FT002. Right?
A lot of presets are just, they're not meant to be used for every single picture.
No.
There might be one picture at some point in time.
Right.
That preset is going to work.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's just part of the collection that if I'm doing something creative and I run across something, great. But other than that, it's those curtail presets.
Right.
Do what's wrong with them.
Yeah. Here some that are labeled a little bit better. Cool light, turquoise and red, soft mist. Ooh, that's kind of nice. Some of these have a wider use than others. Some are very specific to a particular type. All right. So, for example, you may come across a preset in a bundle that is specifically for low key images. Okay, will never work in a high key image, never in a million years. Okay, they're only made for low key images. Maybe they're even low key portrait images. All right, but in a list like what you're seeing here, makes no sense. It's not until you start playing with them. I don't want to say use them. You start playing with them and trying to figure them out that you start discovering their worth. All right.
Hey, Doc?
Yeah.
To me, it would seem better to spend that money on something like Tools, Luminar, or Scopex.
Well, yeah, but those are totally different tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the sky? What is the sky in the background?
Yeah. See, the one thing is you have to understand that all these photographers that sell their presets, they know how to use them. They know when to use them. And they know why they use them because they built them. All right? So what they're banking on is, ooh, I'm a big fan of your editing style. If I buy your presets, I'm going to be able to edit like you. Never in a million years. Because you are not that photographer. You're never going to edit like that photographer. They can give you all their tools. You'll never edit like them. All right? Because you have your own unique way of looking at images than they do. Okay? So for me, buying presets is worthless. All right? Considering that there are so many out there that are free to begin with. All right? Just look up free Lightroom presets and you're going to be inundated. Okay? And then you're going to be spending 5 hours going through the preset just to edit that one image that could have been done in 5 minutes. All right? So I would rather you understand the fundamentals of editing. All right? Come to your own vision. All right? Understand what your vision is. And then take your vision and package it into a preset. Right? Because then you'll know where in your workflow those presets fit. Oh, I'm working on portraits. Well, guess what? I have a series of presets just for portraits. Okay? I have a series of presets that are pretty generic. All right. meaning that it doesn't matter whether I'm editing portraits or landscapes, food, or product. Okay, and I have them in groups according to what the preset does. Right, and here's one for color tones. Right, which is just that's all it does is it gives me that color grading look. Okay. Right. I think I need to update these because they don't work quite well with the current color grading system. Right, since they've made it. Okay. Exposure. Okay. This was something that I built for a workshop that I never use. All right. But here you go. All right. You can go through all your exposure stops. Okay. You can just add your exposure right off the top. Okay. Noise and sharpen. This one I use quite often. All right. My clarity. All right. If I destroy my clarity and I want to bring it back, I have one right there. Okay. ISO variant, noise reduction. Okay. So depending on what my ISO is, it's going to apply a certain amount of noise reduction. Okay. If I want to add a little bit of sharpening, if I want to add a little bit of texture, see now she's looking horrendous. I would never use these presets for her. The nice thing is, all right, and here's a good tip. These presets do a very specific thing. All right. They do a very specific thing. And for every preset that does a specific thing, I'm going to create a preset that removes it. All right. Here I added a lot of texture. I would never do that to this poor woman. All right. I have one here that takes the resets the texture, takes the texture away. Okay. Let's take the clarity away. All right. So this is all part of building useful presets, right? Not just getting them willy-nilly, right? Because that FD001 means absolutely nothing to me. Okay. Here's one for vignettes. All right. I love vignettes. Okay. Sometimes I can get a little bit heavy-handed with vignettes. So to avoid getting heavy-handed with vignettes, I rely on my presets. All right. That's kind of like somebody in my ear saying, "Hey, back it off." Okay. So there, that's just plus 10 of little dark vignette. Okay. And of course, there's my remove. So I can hover on and off of that just to see how that vignette works. All right. Or what I can do is I can just hover over these back and forth and say, okay, that one looks pretty heavy. That one doesn't look too bad. That one looks too light. Okay, I'm going to go with that one. Right? Just as simple as that. Rather than moving a bunch of sliders, I can go here and very quickly add my vignette. Okay? And after a while, you get to understand, the effect before you even apply it, and you just go right to it. Okay. And then I have client presets. When I'm working on a very specific client, I will build a preset for their work. Okay. And that one changes depending on my client list. Okay. All right.
Doug,
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I can't find the presets on my Lightroom. How come I don't have presets? I can't find it.
Oh, you know what? I may have added some of these. I can't remember. But if you go to presets, click on the little plus,
I can't find it. It doesn't show up. That problem.
Oh, you have to be in the develop module.
In the develop module?
Yeah. Yeah, because these are developed presets.
Oh, okay. All right. Stupid. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's all right. That's why we're here. All right. So make sure you're in the develop module. All right.
I see it now. I
Yep.
see the
Presets. All right.
Okay.
If there are stuff on there that you don't want to be looking at, click on the little plus arrow.
I understand.
Manage presets. Yeah. And then just uncheck whatever you don't want.
I understand everything you're doing. I just couldn't find it.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So, yeah. So these are your develop presets, meaning that they modify everything that is on the on that right-hand side. Okay. If you go to where it says like for making a book, all right. Why is it? Oh no! What happened? There we go. All right. If we go to the book section, all right, there are presets there as well. All right. Where is my? Oh no, I'm sorry. The print, not the book. Print. I was gonna say there are presets here. All right. They're called templates. They're presets. Solo mode. Okay. And of course, on your ingest, you have presets there. And when you export an image, all right? Come on, cancel. Export. You have presets here as well. All right, all these presets. Okay. And Lightroom only comes with just a few presets for your export. Everything else you have to build. Okay? So you can find presets all over Lightroom. All right? And the thing with presets, some people kind of equate them to like filters that you can use on your smartphone. Snapseed, you apply a filter. LinkedIn, you take a picture, you apply a filter, all that. They may resemble that in a way, but you have to understand that this is not the end to the means. This is just a way of getting you closer to your desired result. Okay? You shouldn't rely on a preset to give you the final look. That's not what they're for. All right? Simply because there are just way too many variables in play to use them globally across the board to all your images. Okay? So don't use them as like a filter. Okay? They're also not like an action in Photoshop. Action is a series of steps to get you through a repetitive series of actions. Oh, that didn't sound right. An action is a series of steps that take the image from one stage to another stage. All right? That no matter what the image is, it's still going to work for that image, right? But even those, if you build your action right in Photoshop, you're able to go in and manually adjust the steps. A preset is simply, as the name implies, it's everything that you select to modify has a preset number associated with it. All right. So, for example, in the basic, all right, you have your exposure. All right. The default is 0. But if you move the slider, you can take that slider to -5 and all the way to +5. Okay? And everything between. Every single one of those numbers, if you make a preset, for example, here, plus 2.77. Every time you use that preset, it's going to apply that preset number to that value, right? So the value exposure is going to get the number 2.77 every single time. And then, of course, if it doesn't fit, you have to go in and manually move it, all right? So be aware of that. It's not a filter. It's not an action, okay? It's just a preset numbers that helps move you forward a little bit more efficiently, and then you tweak it from there. Okay? Hope that made sense, because that was starting to not make sense to me as I was speaking it. I confuse myself sometimes. Okay. Goodness gracious. Any other questions? I gave you guys a lot to think about today.
I'm afraid to ask any more questions.
I don't want to explode heads.
I don't have a question, but I do have a shout out.
Sure.
I put all this stuff, aside from my stupid question I had the other day, I was able to pretty effectively use Lightroom and Photoshop to batch process a whole bunch of, so there were photos of art that I was doing for somebody, and I like doing that kind of stuff. It sure was fun to be able to have to mass produce the things that I need to do for different things. And so
yeah.
It was great. Love that Lightroom.
Yes. Yeah. See, and I think part of the problem is people have the wrong idea of what Lightroom is. A lot of people think Lightroom is just for editing a photo. No. Photoshop is for editing a photo. Lightroom is for batch processing multiple photos. That's where it wins for me. I tweak individual photos, but I'm often editing multiple photos at a time in Lightroom. So.
Well, what I was doing was I was taking these pictures, which were actually, I got photos of the art, taken, someone took a picture on the wall, frame the wall around it. So it was up to me to take those and then crop them and make them into regular art. And then I shipped them over to Photoshop, where I had several of these Photoshop mock-ups.
Right.
Things. So I was putting them into scenes and then saving those and then shipping that back to Lightroom, and it was a neat little production operation.
Yeah, here's some shots I took of an artist's work. All right. Okay, let me found it. Okay. He wanted, this particular artist wanted multiple shots of each for his website. A full dead on, here, I'll do it like this. A full dead on, one at an angle to show the dimension of the piece, and a couple of detail shots. So all these got batch processed, So, been there, done that.
Well, anyway, big thanks.
Not a problem. All right, guys.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
So we kind of touched on a little bit on workflow with Lightroom today. Next week, I want to get into an editing workflow in Photoshop, and we're going to be specifically dealing with portraits, right? Simply because this month's challenge is the portrait, right? So next week, I'll show you kind of my workflow for editing portraits. It's not high-end photo retouching, but it's also not, run-of-the-mill, kick them out photo processing. Okay, it gets a little involved. So if you can get a portrait for next week, that'd be great. At least you'll be able to kind of like follow along and play with it. If not, at least by the third week, the third lesson, okay, for our Q&A. So looking forward to see what people make.
Thanks, Doug. Have a nice one.
All right, guys, be safe. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.